The desert-awakening Marcus Chun felt the burning sand against his cheek before he opened his eyes. The taste of copper filled his mouth, and his wrists shrieked in pain from the tight restraints cutting into his skin. Above him, 3 suns blazed in an alien sky painted the color of rust and amber. The memory came flooding back like ice water. The salvage job on Kepler 442b had seemed routine enough. His crew had been hired to strip valuable components from a crashed Imperial transport ship in the Crimson Wastes. But when they arrived at the coordinates, armed soldiers in sleek black armor had been waiting. Pirates, Marcus realized too late. They had killed his crew without hesitation and left him tied up in the middle of nowhere to die slowly under the triple suns. Marcus tested his bonds again. The synthetic rope was military-grade, designed to hold even enhanced humans. His captors had been thorough, taking his tools, his water, even his boots. They wanted him to suffer before the end came, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated what a human mechanic could do with determination and spite. Marcus rolled onto his side, ignoring the sharp rocks that dug into his ribs. About 50 meters away, he could see the wreckage of what looked like a luxury transport vessel. Smoke still rose from its twisted hull, suggesting the crash had been recent. If there were survivors, they might have supplies he could use. The journey across the sand took him nearly an hour. Moving with his hands bound behind his back was torture. But Marcus had learned long ago that humans could endure far more than most species believed possible. His maintenance work in zero-G had taught him how to move efficiently without using his hands. As he approached the wreckage, Marcus heard something that made him freeze. A low, rumbling growl echoed from within the ship's hull. Then another, higher-pitched, almost like a whimper. Something was alive in there. The ship's design was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. Elegant curves and flowing lines suggested it belonged to one of the more artistic alien species. Symbols he didn't recognize were etched into the hull plating. This wasn't human technology. Marcus found a breach in the hull large enough to crawl through. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. The ship's interior was even more ornate than its exterior, with walls that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. But what caught his attention were the sounds coming from deeper within the ship. Following the noise, Marcus discovered a cargo bay that had been converted into something resembling stables. 6 large enclosures lined the walls, each one containing a creature that took his breath away. They were dragons, or at least something very much like the dragons from human mythology. Each one was about the size of a small horse, with scales that gleamed like precious gems. Their wings were folded against their bodies, and their intelligent eyes watched Marcus with obvious distress. The dragons were trapped. The crash had damaged their enclosures, and several of the creatures had been injured by falling debris. One smaller dragon, its scales a brilliant blue-green, was barely conscious. A piece of metal had pinned its wing, and dark blood pooled beneath it. But Marcus's attention was drawn to the figure slumped against the far wall. It was humanoid, but clearly alien, with pale silver skin and features that were almost ethereal in their beauty. The being wore elaborate robes that marked him as someone of high status, probably royalty. A thin circlet of metal rested on his forehead, confirming Marcus's suspicions. This was a prince or noble of some kind. The alien was unconscious but breathing. A medical scanner on the wall showed vital signs that seemed stable, though Marcus couldn't read the alien script. What he could understand was the desperation in the dragon's behavior. They kept looking between their trapped companion and their unconscious master. Clearly distressed by their inability to help either, Marcus approached the nearest dragon slowly, speaking in the calm voice he used when working with nervous equipment. "Easy there, big guy. I know you can't understand me, but I'm going to try to help." The dragon's head tilted, studying Marcus with eyes that held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. It made a soft sound, almost like a question. Marcus examined his restraints again. The rope was strong, but the knot was tied in a standard military fashion. If he could find something sharp enough to fray the fibers, he might be able to work himself free. The damaged enclosures had plenty of twisted metal that could serve his purpose. It took another hour of careful work, but Marcus finally managed to cut through his bonds. His hands were numb and bleeding, but he was free. The dragons had watched his entire escape attempt with fascination, occasionally making soft sounds that almost seemed encouraging. Now came the real challenge. Marcus was a mechanic, not a veterinarian, but he understood physics and engineering. These creatures were trapped by mechanical problems, and mechanical problems could be solved with the right approach and tools. The smallest dragon was in the worst condition. Marcus could see that the metal pinning its wing would need to be lifted carefully to avoid further damage. The piece was part of a support beam that had buckled during the crash. If he could find the right leverage point, he might be able to move it. Marcus searched the ship's maintenance areas and found a toolkit that, while alien in design, contained tools he could recognize and use. A hydraulic lifter, cutting implements, and what appeared to be medical supplies. The alien who owned this ship had prepared for emergencies. As Marcus worked to free the injured dragon, he talked continuously. Back on Earth we have stories about dragons. Mighty creatures that could fly and breathe fire. Never thought I'd meet real ones, especially not like this. Your friend over there, he must care about you a lot to keep you on his ship. The dragon he was helping seemed to understand that Marcus was trying to help. It held perfectly still as he positioned the lifter and began to slowly raise the debris. When the pressure was finally released, the dragon let out a sound that was unmistakably relief. Marcus used the medical supplies to treat the wing as best he could. The dragon's natural healing seemed remarkably fast, and within minutes the bleeding had stopped. It would need time to fully recover, but it would live one by one. Marcus freed the other dragons from their damaged enclosures. Each rescue was a puzzle to solve, requiring him to understand the mechanics of both the alien ship and the creatures themselves. By the time he finished, all 6 dragons were free and gathered around their unconscious master, the largest dragon. Its scales, a deep crimson touched with gold, approached Marcus and lowered its great head. For a moment Marcus thought it might be threatening him, but then he realized the gesture was one of gratitude. The dragon was bowing to him. As the alien prince began to stir, Marcus knew his real adventure was just beginning. He had saved the dragons, but now he had to figure out how to get off this desert planet alive. And something told him that the dragons and their royal owner might be the key to his survival. The prince awakens. Prince Zephyr Starweaver opened his eyes to find a strange alien crouched beside him, offering water from a damaged cup. The creature was unlike any species he had encountered in his travels across the galaxy. Bipedal like many spacefaring races, but with distinctive features that marked it as something new. Short brown hair, tanned skin marked with scars, and eyes the color of Earth's ancient oceans. "Easy there," the alien said in a language Zephyr's universal translator struggled to process. "You took quite a hit when your ship went down. Don't try to move too quickly." Zephyr's first instinct was to reach for his ceremonial blade, but his hand found only empty air. His weapons were gone, likely scattered in the crash. But as his vision cleared, he saw something that made him forget about defense entirely. His dragons were free from their damaged enclosures, gathered around him in a protective circle. The smallest one, Shimmer, was moving without the limp that had worried him before the crash. "You freed them," Zephyr whispered. His voice hoarse from dehydration. The alien, who seemed to understand the translator's output, nodded. "Found them trapped when I crawled in here. Couldn't just leave them suffering?" He gestured to his torn clothing and bloodied hands. "Took some work, but they're all okay now." Prince Zephyr had been raised in the courts of the Luminous Empire, where every action was calculated for political gain. Acts of pure altruism were rare among his people, and rarer still from unknown aliens who had nothing to gain from their kindness. Yet this stranger had risked his own safety to help creatures that meant nothing to him. "I am Prince Zephyr of the House of Starweaver, third moon of the Luminous Empire," he said formally, struggling to sit up. "To whom do I owe this debt of honor?" The alien actually laughed, a sound filled with genuine mirth despite their dire circumstances. "Marcus Chun, formerly of the human merchant vessel Lucky Strike, currently stranded on this charming vacation spot." His expression grew more serious. Though I've got to ask, what's a prince doing crashed in the middle of nowhere with a cargo hold full of dragons? Zephyr felt the familiar weight of secrets and political intrigue pressing down on him. The truth was complicated and dangerous. He had been fleeing an arranged marriage that would have strengthened his family's political position, but enslaved him to a life of court manipulation? The dragons weren't cargo. They were his companions, raised from eggs in defiance of tradition that said royalty should not bond with lesser creatures. But as he looked at Marcus, who was already moving around the ship's wreckage with the confident efficiency of someone solving practical problems, Zephyr decided on honesty. This human had earned that much. I was running away, he admitted. My family wanted to use me as a political pawn in an alliance marriage. The dragons are my friends, not possessions. When I refused to abandon them, I had to steal my own ship to escape. Marcus paused in his examination of the ship's damaged systems. And now you're crashed on a planet that's trying to kill us all. He looked thoughtful. Any idea where we are? Zephyr activated his wrist display, grateful that at least some of his equipment had survived. Kepler 442b, according to the navigation system. It's a salvage world, mostly desert with scattered ruins. Not many visitors, which made it perfect for laying low while I figured out my next move. Yeah, well, you picked the same hiding spot as some very unfriendly pirates, Marcus said grimly. They killed my crew and left me to die out there. We're not the only ones who know about this place. The implications hit both of them at the same time. If pirates were operating in the area, they would investigate any new crash sites for salvageable goods. A royal transport ship would be an irresistible target, as if summoned by their fears. The sound of approaching aircraft engines echoed across the desert. Marcus quickly moved to a damaged viewport and peered out. 3 sleek attack craft were circling the crash site like vultures. Same ships that ambushed my crew, Marcus confirmed. They'll be landing soon to pick through the wreckage. Prince Zephyr felt despair creeping in. His ship was too damaged to fly, and they had no weapons capable of fighting off armed pirates. But as he looked at Marcus, he saw not fear but the calculating expression of someone working through a complex problem. Your dragons, Marcus said suddenly. How smart are they exactly? Very intelligent. They understand complex commands and can work together as a team. But they're not weapons, Marcus. I won't ask them to fight. Marcus shook his head. Not fighting, escaping, how much weight can they carry? Zephyr's eyes widened as he began to understand. Each one can carry about 200 kilograms while flying. But Marcus, they've never carried humanoid passengers. The physics alone. Leave the physics to me, Marcus said with a grin that was equal parts confidence and desperation. I'm a mechanic. I solve impossible problems for a living. The sound of landing ships grew closer. Marcus was already moving through the wreckage, gathering materials with an efficiency that impressed the prince. Lengths of cable, pieces of hull plating, anything that could be fashioned into makeshift harnesses. I need to know about your dragon's anatomy, Marcus said as he worked. Wing strength, flight patterns, how they communicate with each other. Prince Zephyr found himself drawn into Marcus's infectious energy. Despite their impossible situation, the human seemed genuinely excited by the challenge. He explained how the dragons used complex wing movements and subsonic calls to coordinate their flying formations. How their hollow bones were stronger than most metals. How they could fly for hours without tiring. Perfect, Marcus muttered. Sketching rough diagrams on a piece of hull plating. We're going to build a flying harness system. The dragons fly in formation, supporting a platform between them. It's crazy enough that it might actually work. The largest dragon, Crimson, approached and nuzzled Prince Zephyr's shoulder. The prince placed his hand on the creature's warm scales and felt the familiar, mental connection that had bonded them since Crimson was a hatchling. Through that link he sensed curiosity and determination. The dragons wanted to help. They're willing to try, Zephyr told Marcus. But we don't have much time. The pirates were setting down just outside the ship. Marcus could hear voices shouting orders in several different languages. They would be inside the wreckage within minutes, working with desperate efficiency. Marcus and Prince Zephyr lashed together a platform using hull plates and support cables. The harness system was crude but functional, designed to distribute weight across all 6 dragons while giving them freedom to fly naturally. This is either going to be the most spectacular rescue in galactic history, Marcus said as they finished the last connections, or the shortest flight on record. Prince Zephyr heard the sound of cutting tools working on the ship's hull. The pirates had found their way inside and were systematically searching the wreckage. It was time to go. The dragons seemed to understand the urgency. They positioned themselves around the platform while Marcus and Prince Zephyr climbed aboard. The makeshift aircraft looked ridiculous and impossible. But as the 6 magnificent creatures spread their wings and began to beat in perfect synchronization, it actually started to lift. "Hold on," Prince Zephyr called out as they rose through the breach in the ship's hull. "Dragons don't fly smoothly like mechanical aircraft." Marcus gripped the platform's safety lines as they burst into the alien sky. Below them, pirates emerged from the wreckage just in time to see their prey escaping on the backs of legendary creatures. The look of absolute bewilderment on their faces was almost worth the terror of flying on a contraption that defied every safety protocol Marcus had ever learned. But they were flying, and they were free. Now they just had to figure out where to go next. Flight of the Desperate. The dragons carried them across the crimson desert with a grace that defied the crude platform Marcus had cobbled together from wreckage. Prince Zephyr watched in amazement as the human continuously adjusted the rigging during flight, somehow reading the stress patterns in the cables and redistributing weight without any formal training in dragon aerodynamics. "How do you know how to do that?" Zephyr shouted over the wind. Marcus grinned, his hair whipping in the desert breeze. "Same principles as rigging cargo loads in zero gravity. Weight distribution, stress points, balance. Physics works the same whether you're in space or flying on dragons." Below them, the pirate ships had taken to the air in pursuit. 3 sleek fighters against 6 dragons and 2 passengers on an impossible flying contraption. It should have been no contest, but Marcus was already studying their pursuers with the analytical mind of an engineer. "Those ships are built for speed and firepower, not maneuverability," he observed. "Heavy engines, rigid wing structures. Your dragons can turn on a credit chip and fly through spaces those ships can't follow." Prince Zephyr felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly dampened by harsh reality. "Marcus, dragons aren't fighter craft. They don't have weapons or shields. One hit from those plasma cannons and we're all dead." "Then we don't get hit," Marcus replied with infuriating confidence. He was watching the dragon's flight patterns with intense concentration. "Tell me about those ruins we passed 10 kilometers back. The ones that look like a city." "Ancient precursor ruins," Zephyr explained. They're all over this planet. Massive stone structures, lots of tunnels and passages. Archaeologists think they're over 50,000 years old." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Perfect. Complex terrain, tight spaces, and probably built with materials stronger than anything we have today." He looked at Prince Zephyr with an expression that was pure predator. "Time to show these pirates what happens when you corner desperate humans." The dragons seemed to sense Marcus's change in mood. Crimson, the largest, let out a rumbling call that was answered by the others. They began flying in a more complex pattern, weaving through the air in ways that made the platform sway alarmingly, but also made them much harder to target. The first plasma blast seared through the air, just meters from Shimmer's wing. The smallest dragon chirped in what sounded like indignation rather than fear. The second shot went wide as the dragons performed a coordinated spiral that would have been impossible for any mechanical aircraft. "They're getting closer," Prince Zephyr warned as the pirates adjusted their pursuit pattern. Marcus was busy modifying their platform during flight, pulling apart sections of the rigging and rebuilding them into something else. "Not for long. Your dragons are about to become the galaxy's first guided missile system." Before Prince Zephyr could ask what he meant, Marcus had detached several pieces of the platform's support structure and fashioned them into crude projectiles. Lengths of metal tubing weighted with chunks of hull plating, all connected by cables to the main platform. When I give the signal, have your dragons do a sharp dive toward those ruins, Marcus instructed. I'm going to give our friends something to think about. The ancient city rose before them like a fever dream carved in stone. Massive towers twisted toward the sky, connected by bridges and archways that created a three-dimensional maze perfect for evading pursuit. As the dragons began their dive, Marcus released his improvised weapons. The weighted projectiles swung down like medieval flails, trailing behind the dragons as they dove. The pirate ships, following closely, found themselves flying directly into the path of heavy metal objects swinging through the air at high speed. The lead fighter took a direct hit to its port engine, sending it spinning toward the desert floor. Impossible, Prince Zephyr breathed. You just took down a military fighter with scrap metal. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy, Marcus replied, already preparing more projectiles. Speed plus mass equals dead pirates. The remaining two ships spread out, trying to get clear firing angles while avoiding Marcus's improvised anti-aircraft system. But the dragons were now flying through the maze of ancient structures, using the precursor architecture as cover while Marcus continued to rain metal death on their pursuers. The second ship made the mistake of following them into a narrow canyon between two massive towers. Marcus waited until it was committed to the passage before having the dragons execute a sudden 90-degree turn around one of the towers. The ship, unable to match the maneuver, slammed into the ancient stone wall in a spectacular explosion. The final pirate ship pulled back, its pilot clearly reconsidering the wisdom of pursuing prey that had already destroyed two-thirds of his squadron. But Marcus wasn't content to just escape. Can your dragons land on those platforms up there? He asked, pointing to a series of wide stone ledges that circled the tallest tower. Prince Zephyr consulted with his companions through their mental link. Yes, but why would we want to stop? We have the advantage while we're moving. Marcus was studying the ancient architecture with the same intensity he had shown when examining the crashed ship's systems. Because I think I know how to end this permanently. These precursor ruins, they're not just buildings. Look at the patterns in the stone, the way the towers are positioned. Prince Zephyr followed Marcus's gaze and felt his breath catch. Now that it was pointed out, he could see it too. The ruins weren't just a random city. They were arranged in a specific pattern that suggested purpose beyond mere habitation. It's a defensive system, he whispered. The whole city is one massive weapon. Marcus nodded grimly. 50,000 years old and probably still functional. If the precursors built things half as well as their reputation suggests, all we need to do is figure out how to activate it. The dragons settled onto the highest platform with obvious relief. Even their incredible endurance had limits, and carrying passengers while performing combat maneuvers had pushed them to their boundaries. Prince Zephyr could feel their exhaustion through his mental connection. The platform they had landed on was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and flow when viewed directly. At the center was a circular depression that looked suspiciously like a control interface. Marcus approached it with the cautious respect of an engineer examining unknown technology. Don't touch anything, Prince Zephyr warned. Precursor artifacts are notoriously unpredictable. Marcus held up his hands in surrender. I'm not going to just start pushing buttons. But look at the design. It's clearly meant to be operated by multiple individuals working together. And see these indentations? They're size for hands, or at least appendages roughly the size of our hands. The remaining pirate ship had found their position and was circling the tower, looking for a clear shot. Its pilot was being more cautious now, having learned to respect the ingenuity of his prey. But it was only a matter of time before he found an angle that would let him attack without risking the stone defenses. We need to make a decision, Prince Zephyr said. Try to activate unknown alien technology that might kill us all. Or face certain death from that ship. Marcus looked at the control interface, then at the circling pirate ship, then at the 6 exhausted dragons who had risked everything to save them. His expression hardened into something that Prince Zephyr was beginning to recognize as Marcus's problem-solving face. When you put it like that, Marcus said, placing his hands on 2 of the indentations, It's not really much of a choice. Prince Zephyr joined him, pressing his own hands into matching positions on the opposite side of the interface. The moment their skin made contact with the ancient controls, the entire city began to hum with awakening power far below them. Every tower and archway began to glow with symbols that pulsed in perfect synchronization. The pirate ship, caught in the middle of the ancient defensive grid, suddenly found itself the target of energy beams that had been waiting 50 millennia for someone to activate them. The ship lasted exactly 3 seconds before being reduced to atomic particles by weaponry that made modern plasma cannons look like children's toys. As the city's defenses powered down, Prince Zephyr looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. You just activated a precursor defensive system on your first try. Do you realize how impossible that should have been? Marcus shrugged, already examining the control interface with professional interest. Sometimes you just have to trust that smart people build things to be used, even if they're from 50,000 years ago. He paused as Gurn grinned. Besides, I had help from the best co-pilot in the galaxy. Prince Zephyr felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat. For the first time in his life, he had found someone who saw problems as puzzles to solve rather than obstacles to avoid. Together they had achieved something that should have been impossible, but their adventure was far from over. They were still stranded on a hostile planet, and somewhere out there, Prince Zephyr's family was probably organizing a search that would be far more dangerous than any pirates. The awakened city, the ancient precursor, control interface continued to pulse with soft blue light even after the defensive systems had powered down. Marcus ran his hands over the smooth surface, feeling vibrations that suggested the technology was far more complex than just weapons. Prince Zephyr watched nervously as the human explored the alien controls with the fearless curiosity of a child with a new toy. Marcus, perhaps we shouldn't experiment with technology we don't understand, the prince suggested diplomatically. But we do understand it. At least partially, Marcus replied, his fingers tracing the flowing symbols. Look at the interface design. It's intuitive, built for cooperation between multiple users. And these symbols, they're not random decorations. They're status indicators. As if responding to his words, the control surface shifted, symbols rearranging themselves into new patterns. A section of the platform beside them rose from the floor, revealing what could only be described as a map table. A three-dimensional hologram flickered to life above it, showing the entire planet in stunning detail. Prince Zephyr gasped. The holographic display showed not just geographical features, but also technological signatures scattered across the planet's surface. Hundreds of precursor sites were highlighted in blue, while newer settlements and ships appeared as different colored markers. There, Marcus pointed to a cluster of red markers near the planet's northern continent. Those have to be the pirate bases. Look at the energy signatures, they're all wrong for legitimate settlements. And there, Prince Zephyr added, indicating a gold marker that had just appeared at the edge of the system. That's probably my family's search fleet. They're still days away, but they're coming. Marcus studied the display with growing excitement. This isn't just a defensive system, is it? This whole city is a command center. The precursors built a planetary monitoring network that's been running autonomously for 50,000 years. The dragons had been exploring the platform while the two men examined the alien technology. Shimmer, the smallest and most curious, had discovered something that made her chirp excitedly. She was nuzzling what appeared to be a section of wall, but as Marcus approached, he realized it was actually a doorway that had been sealed so perfectly it was invisible until activated. The passage beyond led deeper into the tower, following corridors lined with more of the flowing symbols. Emergency lighting activated as they walked, suggesting the city's systems were designed to assist visitors rather than hinder them. The architecture was beautiful in its alien functionality, with curves and angles that somehow felt both ancient and futuristic. They emerged into a vast chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The room was filled with what could only be described as workshops, but workshops designed for beings with technology far beyond anything the galaxy currently possessed. fabrication units that could apparently manipulate matter at the molecular level, power sources that hummed with energy that registered on no scale Marcus knew, and most intriguingly, what appeared to be a fully functional starship construction facility. The precursors didn't just build cities, Prince Zephyr whispered. They built entire industrial complexes designed to be self-sustaining for geological time periods. Marcus was already examining the fabrication units with professional fascination. The interfaces were similar to the control system they had activated above, clearly designed for intuitive use by intelligent beings. But more importantly, they appeared to be functional. "Your Highness," Marcus said with mock formality, "I think I may have found our ticket off this planet." The starship construction bay held the skeletal framework of a vessel unlike anything either of them had seen before. It was clearly unfinished, abandoned when the precursors had vanished for whatever reason, but the basic structure was sound. More importantly, the construction systems appeared ready to resume work if given proper instructions. "You can't seriously be thinking of finishing a 50,000-year-old starship project," Prince Zephyr protested. Marcus grinned. "Why not? We've got advanced fabrication technology, a complete construction facility, and blueprints that are probably more sophisticated than anything currently flying. All we need to do is figure out how to operate the systems." "All we need to do?" the prince repeated flatly. "Marcus, even if we could understand the technology well enough to complete construction, it would take months or years. My family's fleet will be here in days, and those pirates will probably send reinforcements when their squadron doesn't report back." Marcus studied the holographic blueprints floating above the construction bay. The ship design was elegant and efficient, incorporating principles that human engineers were only beginning to understand. But more than that, it was clearly designed to interface with dragon-like creatures. "Look at these specifications," Marcus said excitedly. "The ship has natural atmospheric control, multiple perches designed for flying creatures, and what looks like breeding facilities. This isn't just a transport ship, it's a dragon carrier." Prince Zephyr moved closer to examine the blueprints. "You're right, but I still don't see how we can complete construction in time to escape." Marcus was already interfacing with the construction bay's control systems, his hands moving across the alien interfaces with growing confidence. "Because we don't need to complete the entire ship. We just need to make it space-worthy enough to get us out of this system. Basic hull integrity, life support, and propulsion. Leave everything else for later." The fabrication systems responded to his commands with surprising efficiency. Apparently, the precursors had designed their technology to be adaptable and user-friendly. The construction bay began to hum with activity as automated systems that had been dormant for millennia sprang back to life. "This is incredible," Prince Zephyr breathed, watching as molecular assemblers began adding material to the ship's framework. "But Marcus, we still don't know if this ship will be compatible with current galactic technology. Navigation, communications, defensive systems, all of it could be completely incompatible." Marcus had anticipated this problem. "That's where your ship comes in. We salvage what we can from the wreckage, integrate it with the precursor technology. Hybrid systems using the best of both approaches." The dragons seemed to approve of the plan. They had found perches within the construction bay and were watching the building process with obvious interest. Crimson, in particular, seemed fascinated by the ship's design, as if recognizing something familiar in its alien architecture. "How long do you think this will take?" Prince Zephyr asked, already mentally calculating their timeline against his family's approaching fleet. Marcus consulted the construction bay's progress displays. "If we work continuously and nothing goes wrong, maybe 3 days. But that's assuming we can successfully integrate the salvage systems and that the precursor technology works as advertised." "And if we can't?" Marcus looked at the prince with an expression of absolute determination. "Then we'll improvise. It's what humans do best." As if summoned by their conversation, new alarms began sounding throughout the city. The holographic display showed additional ships entering the system, but these weren't the gold markers of Prince Zephyr's family fleet. These were the harsh red signatures of military vessels, and they were headed directly for the planet. "Reinforcements," Prince Zephyr said grimly. The pirates called for backup. Marcus studied the approaching fleet with the cold calculation of an engineer solving a complex problem. 6 heavy cruisers, multiple fighter squadrons, and what looks like a troop transport. They're not just coming to investigate their missing squadron. They're coming to claim this planet. And us, the prince added. A luminous Empire prince would be worth a considerable ransom. Marcus turned back to the construction bay with renewed urgency. Then we'd better get this ship flying in record time. Because I have no intention of spending the rest of my life as a pirate's prisoner. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Marcus and Prince Zephyr worked alongside the automated systems, salvaging components from the crashed royal transport and integrating them with precursor technology. The dragons helped where they could, their incredible strength useful for moving heavy components. As the ship began to take shape, Marcus found himself impressed despite the circumstances. The precursor design was not just advanced, it was elegant. Every system had been optimized for efficiency and reliability. If they could get it working, they would have a vessel capable of outrunning anything the pirates could throw at them, but time was running out. The pirate fleet was already beginning orbital insertion, and long-range sensors showed drop ships preparing to deploy to the surface. Soon, the ancient city would be crawling with armed mercenaries looking for 2 very specific prisoners. Marcus, Prince Zephyr said quietly, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm grateful. You could have hidden and tried to survive alone when you found my ship. Instead, you chose to help complete strangers. Marcus looked up from the control panel he was calibrating. You're not strangers anymore. You and your dragons risked everything to get me off that platform. We're partners now. The ship's hull was nearly complete, and the basic systems were coming online. But Marcus knew they would need to test everything carefully. A single system failure during escape or... The hybrid's first flight, the ship Marcus had dubbed Dragon's Heart, was an impossible fusion of ancient precursor technology and salvaged Imperial systems. As he ran through the final pre-flight checks, he marveled at how well the different technologies had integrated. The precursor systems seemed almost eager to interface with newer technology, as if they had been designed with adaptation in mind. Hull integrity at 97%, Prince Zephyr reported from the co-pilot station. Life support systems are functioning, though the atmospheric mix is optimized for both human and luminous Empire physiology. The dragons seem comfortable with it. Marcus glanced back at the 6 magnificent creatures, who had settled into the ship's dragon quarters with obvious satisfaction. The precursor design included perches, feeding systems, and even what appeared to be individual environmental controls for each dragon. It was as if the ancient builders had known exactly what would be needed. Propulsion systems online, Marcus announced, his hands dancing across controls that shouldn't have been familiar but somehow felt natural. But I've got to warn you, this is going to be the most experimental test flight in galactic history. We're flying on theory and hope. The first pirate dropships had reached the planet's surface. Through the city's sensor network, they could watch armed troops deploying near the crash site of Prince Zephyr's original ship. The pirates were being methodical, establishing a perimeter while their technical teams examined the wreckage. They'll figure out we escaped on the dragons eventually, Prince Zephyr observed. And once they do, they'll start scanning for large energy signatures. This city won't stay hidden for long. Marcus engaged the ship's initial startup sequence. The precursor power plant hummed to life with a sound like singing crystals, while the salvaged Imperial navigation systems began interfacing with the ancient stellar cartography databases. The result was a navigation system more accurate than anything either of them had used before. Ready? Marcus asked, his hand hovering over the launch controls. Are we ever really ready for the impossible? Prince Zephyr replied, but his tone was confident rather than fearful. The dragon's heart lifted from the construction bay with a smoothness that defied its hybrid nature. Marcus had expected handling problems from the mixed systems, but the ship flew as if it had been designed specifically for his piloting style. The precursor antigrav systems provided lift while the Imperial attitude thrusters gave him precise control. We're actually flying, Prince Zephyr said in amazement. Marcus, do you realize what we've accomplished? We've successfully merged technologies separated by 50,000 years of development. Let's see how well it handles before we start celebrating, Marcus replied, but he was grinning. The ship responded to his commands like a natural extension of his will. Whatever the precursors had been, they had understood spacecraft. Designed better than any current civilization, they cleared the ancient city and began climbing toward orbit. But Marcus kept one eye on the sensor displays. The pirate fleet was still deploying ground forces, but their orbital assets were positioned to intercept any escaping vessels. 6 heavy cruisers in a defensive shell around the planet, with fighter squadrons already on patrol. They're running an active sensor grid, Prince Zephyr warned. The moment we reach their detection threshold, they'll scramble everything they have to stop us. Marcus studied the tactical display with the analytical mind of an engineer. Then we don't let them detect us. Watch this. He activated what the ship's computers labeled as Precursor Stealth Matrix, though he had no idea what that actually meant until the effects became apparent. The dragon's heart didn't disappear exactly, but it became somehow harder to focus on. Sensor returns became fuzzy and contradictory, as if the ship was occupying multiple positions simultaneously. Incredible, Prince Zephyr breathed. It's not invisibility, it's sensor confusion. The ship is generating false returns to mask its true position. They pass through the pirate detection grid without triggering any alarms. The stealth system was apparently far more sophisticated than simple electronic countermeasures. It seemed to operate on principles that made the ship difficult to perceive on multiple levels, but Marcus knew their real test was yet to come. Escape from the planet was only the first step. They still had to leave the system without being caught, and once they did that, they had to figure out where to go next. Your family's fleet, Marcus said as they reached the edge of the planet's gravity well. How likely are they to shoot first and ask questions later? Prince Zephyr considered the question seriously. Depends on who's commanding the search. If it's my uncle, Admiral Stormwind, he'll try to capture us intact. He's too curious about new technology to risk destroying something this unique. But if they sent my cousin Captain Darkstar, she'd fire on anything that moves. The long-range sensors were picking up the approaching Imperial fleet. 12 ships, including 2 dreadnoughts that could reduce the entire pirate force to atomic debris. They were still several hours out, but coming fast. We could wait, Marcus suggested. Let your family deal with the pirates, then try to negotiate. With what leverage? Prince Zephyr asked. I'm still a runaway prince who stole royal property. And you're an unknown alien in possession of precursor technology. They'd confiscate the ship and probably imprison both of us pending investigation. Marcus made his decision. Then we run. But first, we leave the pirates a present. He activated the Dragon's Heart's weapon systems, another integration of precursor and Imperial technology. The ancient energy projectors had been modified to work with modern targeting computers, creating a hybrid system that was both precise and devastatingly powerful. The pirate fleet was still focused on the planet below, their sensors probing the surface for signs of their escaped prisoners. They never saw the ship that was already behind their formation. Hidden by stealth technology, they couldn't comprehend. Marcus targeted the flagship's main reactor with surgical precision. A single beam of coherent energy, barely visible in the vacuum of space, penetrated the ship's shields and touched off, a chain reaction that consumed the entire vessel in seconds. The remaining pirate ships spun to face this new threat, but the Dragon's Heart was already gone, its stealth systems making it impossible to track. Marcus picked off 2 more ships with the same precision, targeting critical systems rather than attempting to destroy them outright. Why aren't you destroying them completely? Prince Zephyr asked. Because disabled ships send better messages than debris, Marcus replied grimly. I want the survivors to spread the word about what happens to people who massacre human crews and leave them to die in the desert. The remaining pirate ships were breaking formation, their commanders finally realizing they were facing something far beyond their ability to handle. Some fled toward the edge of the system, while others tried to reach the planet's surface where they might find cover. Marcus, Prince Zephyr said quietly. "The Imperial fleet has detected the weapons fire. They're changing course to investigate." Marcus engaged the Dragon's Heart's primary drive system, a fusion of precursor spacefold technology and Imperial hyperdrive that created propulsion capabilities neither civilization had achieved alone. The ship leaped toward the edge of the system at speeds that should have required much larger engines. "Where are we going?" Prince Zephyr asked as the stars began to blur around them. Marcus checked the navigation system, which was already plotting courses to dozens of potential destinations. "Somewhere we can figure out what we've really built here. And somewhere your family can't find us until we're ready to be found." The Dragon's Heart reached the system's edge and prepared to jump to hyperspace. Behind them, the Imperial fleet was engaging the remaining pirates in a battle that would probably become the subject of military studies for years to come. But Marcus and Prince Zephyr were already looking toward the future. "You know," Prince Zephyr said as the hyperspace window opened before them, "we've accidentally created something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Precursor technology integrated with modern systems, ships that can be built by any civilization advanced enough to operate the construction facilities." Marcus nodded soberly. "Which means we have a responsibility to make sure it's used for the right reasons. The question is, what are the right reasons?" As the Dragon's Heart leaped into hyperspace, carrying its crew of humans, aliens, and dragons toward an uncertain future, Marcus found himself wondering if they had just saved themselves or accidentally started a revolution. Either way, he thought with a grin, it was going to be an interesting ride. New Horizons 3 months later, the Dragon's Heart drifted in the shadow of an ancient asteroid field, hidden from the shipping lanes that connected the major civilizations. Marcus had spent the time learning to fully integrate the ship's hybrid systems while Prince Zephyr worked on establishing secure communications with carefully selected contacts throughout the galaxy. The ship had become more than just a vessel. It was a home. The dragons had adapted to space travel with enthusiasm, particularly enjoying the zero-gravity chambers, where they could practice three-dimensional flying maneuvers impossible on any planet. Shimmer had even learned to operate some of the ship's secondary controls, her intelligence proving far greater than most spacefaring species realized. "Any word from your contacts?" Marcus asked as he finished calibrating the newest addition to their technology suite. They had been building improvements to the ship's systems, each modification teaching them more about the remarkable adaptability of precursor technology. "Several interesting developments," Prince Zephyr replied, reviewing the encrypted messages on his personal communicator. "The pirate attack on Kepler 442b has caused quite a stir. My family's investigation concluded that unknown aliens with advanced technology rescued me and destroyed the pirate fleet. They're not sure whether to classify me as kidnapped or voluntarily missing." Marcus laughed. "And your opinion of that classification?" "I'm leaning toward voluntarily missing, at least until we decide what to do with what we've learned." Prince Zephyr gestured toward the technical schematics they had been developing. "Marcus, we've proven that precursor technology can be integrated with any sufficiently advanced civilization systems. We've also discovered construction facilities on 17 different worlds. If this knowledge became public, it would trigger the biggest technological arms race in galactic history," Marcus finished. "Every major power would be scrambling to claim precursor sites and build hybrid fleets." They had discussed this problem extensively during their months in hiding. The Dragon's Heart was proof that ancient technology could be successfully merged with modern systems, creating capabilities far beyond what either could achieve alone. But that same proof made them potentially the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. "However," Prince Zephyr continued with a small smile, "I've also been in contact with some very interesting people. Scientists, explorers, independent traders, even a few progressive military officers. People who are more interested in using advanced technology to solve problems than to conquer their neighbors." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we don't have to choose between keeping this secret forever and letting the wrong people abuse it." Prince Zephyr activated a holographic Display showing a star map, dotted with neutral systems and independent colonies. What if we created a third option? The map showed dozens of worlds that existed outside the major power blocks, places where independent-minded beings had chosen to make their own way in the galaxy. Colonies of scientists, artists, explorers, and refugees from various conflicts who had formed their own small but stable communities. A technology-sharing network, Marcus said, understanding immediately. Provide precursor integration knowledge to people who will use it responsibly. Help them build better lives instead of better weapons. Exactly. We start small, with people we trust, and build from there. Maybe eventually we can create an alternative to the constant military competition between the major empires. It was an ambitious plan, perhaps impossibly idealistic. But as Marcus looked around the Dragon's Heart's bridge, at the impossible fusion of technologies that shouldn't have been compatible, he found himself believing it might work. We'd need resources, he said, his engineer's mind already working through the practical challenges. Ships, equipment, people with the skills to operate precursor construction facilities. I have contacts who can provide funding and personnel, Prince Zephyr replied. And you've proven that humans have an unusual talent for making alien technology work. There are probably others of your species who share that gift. Marcus grinned. There definitely are. Humans have been taking apart alien technology and rebuilding it to work better since we first left our home system. It's practically a cultural obsession. Their conversation was interrupted by Crimson's warning call from the observation deck. The great dragon's enhanced senses had detected something their instruments had missed. Marcus quickly activated the ship's sensor array and found 3 vessels approaching their position. Imperial ships, Prince Zephyr identified grimly. Light cruisers running silent until now. They found us. But as the ships drew closer, their identification signals became clear. These weren't military vessels hunting a runaway prince. They were independent traders, flying under letters of marque that identified them as civilian contractors. They're transmitting the recognition codes you gave your contacts. Marcus realized. Prince Zephyr smiled with obvious relief. Our first recruits. A trader named Captain Steele who specializes in salvage operations. A research vessel commanded by Dr. Voss who studies ancient civilizations. And an exploration ship owned by the Freehold Mining Consortium. The next few hours were spent in careful negotiations as the 3 ships docked with the Dragon's Heart. Marcus found himself impressed by the quality of people Prince Zephyr had attracted. Captain Steele was a former Imperial Navy officer who had left service over ethical disagreements with her superiors. Dr. Voss was a brilliant xenorchaeologist whose theories about precursor technology had been dismissed by mainstream academics. The Freehold representatives were practical engineers looking for better ways to extract resources from dangerous environments. So this is the famous hybrid ship, Dr. Voss said as Marcus gave them a tour of the integrated systems. The sensor readings alone suggest technologies that shouldn't be possible. Everything about this ship shouldn't be possible, Marcus replied. But that's what makes it interesting. Captain Steele was examining the weapon systems with professional interest. Defensive capabilities far beyond anything in the current fleet databases. But you've configured them for precision rather than raw destruction. Because our goal isn't to fight wars, Prince Zephyr explained. It's to give people the tools to defend themselves and build better lives. The Freehold engineers were most interested in the construction bay, which had been modified to produce a variety of useful technologies rather than just starships. Marcus had developed fabrication protocols for everything from advanced medical equipment to improved environmental systems for harsh colony worlds. This could revolutionize settlement of marginal worlds, one of the engineers observed. Colonies that are currently barely sustainable could become thriving communities with this technology. Over the following weeks, they established their first permanent base in an abandoned system that contained 3 precursor construction facilities. The ancient sites were reactivated using the techniques Marcus had developed. And soon they were producing small vessels that combined the best of multiple technologies. Their first major success was a medical ship designed for disaster relief. The hybrid systems allowed it to manufacture medicines and medical equipment in real time, while advanced sensors could detect life signs through debris or adverse conditions. When a plague outbreak threatened a remote mining colony, the ship arrived in time to save thousands of lives. Word spread through the independent systems. Scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, all kinds of people who wanted to use advanced technology to solve problems rather than create them. The network grew slowly but steadily, connected by secure communications and shared principles rather than formal government. "You know," Marcus said one evening as he watched the dragons playing in the zero-gravity chamber, "6 months ago I was just a salvage mechanic trying to make enough credits to keep my ship running." Prince Zephyr joined him at the observation window. "And I was a prince running away from responsibilities I thought I couldn't handle. Now look at us. Now we're accidentally creating a new form of civilization," Marcus agreed. "Think it'll work?" "Ask me in 100 years," Prince Zephyr replied. "But I have a good feeling about it." The dragon's heart continued its journey through the galaxy, no longer hiding but not seeking confrontation either. They had found a third path between the extremes of secrecy and exploitation, and that path was leading them toward something unprecedented in galactic history. Marcus often wondered what the precursors would think of their ancient technology being used this way. Somehow, he suspected they would approve. After all, they had built their systems to be adaptable, to work with whatever intelligence discovered them, perhaps that had been their plan all along, to leave behind tools that would help younger civilizations grow and prosper rather than destroy each other. If so, Marcus thought as he watched the stars wheel past the observation windows, then he and Prince Zephyr were finally using those tools for their intended purpose. The dragons seemed to agree. Crimson had taken to spending hours staring out at the stars as if contemplating the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. And in the ship's integrated systems, ancient precursor technology hummed in harmony with modern engineering, proof that different worlds,